morning, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin in Colombia, where President Juan Manuel Santos has announced that General Rubén Darío Alzate may be released as early as this Saturday. Manuel Santos finally replied to FARC demands to call off the massive military operation in the region where Darío Alzate would be released. Manuel Santos says FARC guerrilla leaders told him that they would release the general and two other persons as soon as all the military activity was suspended in the region. After Darío Alzate was detained by the FARC, Santos called off the peace talks, which could now be resumed as early as next week. Continuing in Colombia, where at least 180 jailed members of the FARC have gone on a hunger strike to protest a lack of adequate medical care within the country's prisons. The hunger strike began in La Picota prison in the capital city of Bogota at 6 Monday morning. The protesters have likened the medical care in La Picota prison to torture. They also say the state is guilty of neglect and, quote, providing them nothing but a slow and painful death. Again, where accusations have surfaced of another mass kidnapping in Guerrero State that came before the disappearance of students out of Ayotzinapa. The mother of an alleged victim says 31 teenagers were abducted in Cocula as they were leaving school on July 17th. The kidnappers were reportedly using patrol vehicles and wearing navy blue uniforms. She says no one reported the crime because they and their children were threatened to be killed. Mexican authorities responded Wednesday saying that they could not confirm the abductions. Protests will continue in Mexico today, marking 2 months since the disappearance of the 43 students from Ayotzinapa. Protesters plan to block government buildings, including the Attorney General's office. They will demand the release of 11 students arrested at a demonstration last week and accused by authorities of terrorism. Families of the 43 missing students canceled a meeting with the government Wednesday. They say top officials were not going to attend as promised. They called it yet another example of the state's unwillingness to take the investigation seriously. Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto spoke over the phone Wednesday with U.S. President Barack Obama. The two talked about U.S. immigration policy, but White House sources say Obama advised Peña Nieto that the crime against the Ayotzinapa students should be exhaustively investigated. Obama sent his condolences to the families and friends of the victims and calls the disappearance of the students a, quote, atrocious and barbaric crime. Both heads of states discussed mass immigration into the U.S. and how they could work together to prevent it.
It has shaped our...
In Venezuela now, a far-right opposition figure will face charges for her involvement in a plot to kill Socialist President Nicolas Maduro and pave the way for a coup. Former legislator Maria Machado was accused of the crime earlier this year after a series of emails were discovered revealing her plans. She has been accused of being involved in plots against the government in the past. In 2002, she was allegedly involved in a coup attempt against then-President Hugo Chavez, and in 2013 against Maduro. In Uruguay, new polls have been released ahead of this Sunday's presidential runoff. Ruling Broad Front Party candidate Tabaré Vázquez is expected to glide to a victory. Right-wing National Party candidate Luis Lacalle recently acknowledged that he would not likely win the vote. Vázquez's expected victory is largely due to President José Mujica's vast popularity and economic performance. One survey reveals Vázquez would win with nearly 55% of the vote, while Lacalle would garner only 40%. Results of the elections are expected as soon as midnight this Sunday. Unrest and outrage continues in the United States after a grand jury decision to not indict a white police officer who shot and killed an unarmed teenager. Protests continued in Ferguson, Missouri, and really around the United States. According to official reports, over 400 people were arrested in various cities. In Ferguson, streets were mostly quiet. One of the largest rallies took place in Los Angeles, where several hundred demonstrators marched through downtown. They threw bottles and rocks and disobeyed orders to disperse. Police arrested nearly 50 there. Rallies were also held in San Diego and Oakland. About 70 demonstrators marched through Atlanta and dozens gathered in Union Square.
Go, go, go!
U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder has told civil rights activists that the Justice Department will aggressively investigate police practices in Ferguson, Missouri. He says federal authorities are moving quickly in its investigation of police patterns and practices. In 2013, a state attorney general's report found that more than 85% of motorists pulled over in Ferguson were African American. It also revealed that arrests among blacks were twice the rate among white residents. And staying in the United States, Republicans remain set on finding ways to counter President Barack Obama's executive action on immigration, a measure they have harshly criticized. A congressional research memo released Wednesday warns that U.S. legislators could impede Obama from using federal immigration funding to issue permits for 5 million undocumented immigrants. Now, according to the memo, legislators could underfund immigration procedures and even prohibit U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Agency from using specific funds for specified purposes.
There's words. Hurting.
We go now to the Austrian capital of Vienna. While the price of oil dropped Wednesday to $76.28, OPEC representatives hinted it was highly unlikely that they would decide to cut production in order to bolster the sagging prices. Prices are currently the lowest since 2010. That's despite calls from some members of the group to remove surplus crude from the market. The meeting of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries will be one of the most closely watched in years because oil prices have sunk 30% since June due to the U.S. shale boom and slower economic growth in China and Europe.
The conference will be formally open.
To Geneva now. That's where UN human rights investigators have challenged President Obama to live up to his country's principles by publishing a report by the CIA on its interrogation methods. They say that the report that was commissioned by the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee would be welcomed widely by torture victims and human rights groups around the world. They also said the U.S. must rise to meet the international standards it has set in regards to human rights, transparency, and accountability. The report apparently reveals torture methods used by the CIA on prisoners during the U.S. war on terror. We have plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English for Telesur English. I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great Thursday.